Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Pam Edgar, the Director of Education at CaringKind. We're so glad you're here today. And you're here for understanding and decoding distressing behaviors. And I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker, Stephani Shivers. Stephani is the Chief Innovation Officer at CaringKind, where she leads the development of new programs and services for individuals and families impacted by dementia. Stephani has over 35 years leadership experience in community-based organizations, including a second career as an occupational therapist specializing in cognitive function. Thank you so much for being here today, Stephani. We're thrilled, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. It's my pleasure to be with you this evening, and I hope that this will be a helpful conversation for you all. This is actually a kind of a partner to another talk that we did a few weeks back on understanding emotional communication. And so I would just encourage you, if you haven't heard that talk before, I'd send you back to that one as a reference. And tonight we're going to be talking about understanding and decoding distressing behaviors. We're going to talk about why people act the way they do. We're going to talk about what behaviors are, maybe what they aren't. We're going to talk about what can influence behaviors and what can be done to decrease and to hopefully avoid distressing behaviors. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about promoting well-being and meaningful engagement. So let's start off with some general conversation around why people act the way they do. So news flash for those of you in the Zoom room tonight, we are all people. And when I ask the question, why do people act the way they do? I'm talking about all people, not just people with dementia, not people without dementia, but why do people in general act the way that they do? And people act the way they do because there are things that are happening inside us as people. There are things that are happening outside of us. And what's happening inside and outside of us then influence the way that we act, react, and behave. This is true for all of us, whether we're living with a cognitive impairment or not, or a form of dementia. So I want to level set with some language tonight and just with kind of a definition of what is behavior in general. So as Pam said, I'm an occupational therapist by background. And so a behavior to me is a function. And behavior is a combination. It could be seen as an action, a reaction, or an expression. And what do I mean by those things? An action is something that we do. It's something that we do out of a need or out of a desire. I want to make a phone call, and so I pick up my phone to make the phone call. I need to go shopping, and so I'm, trudging my shopping cart. Those are actions that I do. A reaction is something that I do in response to something or in response to someone. Red light, I stop. I see a friend, I give them a high five or say hello. I have the urge to go to the bathroom. I'm looking for a restroom. Those are reactions to something or to someone. Then we have our personal expressions, the way that we express ourselves. And there are a number of factors that play into that. My personality, how do I express myself in the world? That can be based on my culture, my family dynamics. Lots of different factors play into how I express myself. And so when we're talking about behaviors, we're really talking about a combination of actions, reactions, and expressions that are all outward responses based on and in our experience with the world. Our actions, reactions, and expressions are forms of communications. They're ways that we communicate with the world. And so let me ask you a question. Are our actions, reactions, and expressions valid? Am I entitled to my actions, reactions, and expressions? I think we would all say yes to that. Then the question is, are the actions, reactions, and expressions of people who have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment or another form of dementia, are their actions, reactions, and expressions valid? And the answer to that is also true. And unfortunately, what happens too often is that when a person gets a diagnosis, suddenly they're viewed through a lens of behaviors. And I just put that out there for us to consider as we go through the conversation this evening. So let's talk about what can influence our behaviors or our actions, reactions, and expressions. First, we're going to talk about what's going on inside of us. What's happening inside of us? A combination of feelings, emotions, instincts. We have physical needs, we have sensory feelings and experiences, and all these things influence our actions, reactions, and behaviors. And if you have a form of dementia, you also have changing cognition. So let's talk a little bit about feelings and emotions. Sometimes what's going on in a person may be obvious, but sometimes there may be subtle but distinct differences. So here I've got 4 photographs for you to look at. And what do you think these people are feeling? And typical responses when I do this live are happy, happy, angry, sad. But what else might they be feeling? This gentleman up here could be feeling happy, could be content, maybe peaceful. This person might be feeling happiness, gratitude, being generous or giving. Mickey Rooney here could be angry, but he could also be feeling rage or indignation. And this person, it could be bored, lonely, worried, or sad. So all of those are variations of emotions, but we're only looking at kind of, one. It's easy to kind of quickly lock into one emotion, which actually might better serve us to dig a little bit deeper. Some other things that are going on inside of us are our instincts. Our instincts are intermingled with our feelings and emotions and are deeply rooted. And we typically think of things like fight, flight, or freeze with instincts. But we also have instincts to care, to protect, to escape, to be attracted. For over 40 years, counselors and psychologists have been exploring feelings and emotions, and this is an example of a feelings wheel. There are several different types of feelings wheel. This is one that's by a woman named Gloria Wilcox that she created back in the 80s. And she created it to help people learn and to recognize and to communicate about their feelings. In the center, which is hard to see here, I realize this is small, I'm going to jump ahead. There are 6 primary feelings that are at the center. And then there are related feelings that are in these outer rings. And their top half of this wheel are negative emotions. And on the bottom half of this wheel are comforting or more empowering feelings. So on the top are feelings that would be more distressing, more disempowering. On the bottom, more comforting, more empowering. And there's going to be a copy of this wheel in the handouts, so I don't want you to panic and feel like you have to jot all this information down. But these are the 6 core emotions. Sad, which is across from joyful, scared, which is across from peaceful, and mad, which is across from powerful. And the reason why I point out what's across from other core emotion is because when you're thinking about the experience of being scared, what the antidote for being scared is related to peacefulness. This is really helpful when you're thinking about power and people who are angry or experiencing anger, because often what's happening is related to feelings of disempowerment. I'm going to go back one slide here, and so hopefully you can see a little bit what I'm talking about here. So you can see that being frustrated or irritated or jealous or hostile or critical are all rooted in the core emotion of mad. But that's really related to this concept of power. So being disrespected can cause someone to be angry or frustrated. Not feeling valued, which is down here on the power side, can be related to being distant or sarcastic. We'll tease that out a little bit more as we go along. So in addition to feelings going on inside people, emotions and instincts, we also have physical and sensory experiences. What do we think's happening inside of these people? This gentleman here is not feeling so good. It looks like maybe, he might be feverish, weak, tired. This person here, hot, sweaty, maybe stressed. This person, cold, pain, maybe achy here. So all these are physical experiences, sensory experiences. And then in addition to emotions and instincts and physical and sensory experiences, as if those aren't enough, we also have our own background and history that impacts how we think, how we feel, and how we interact with the world. So my actions, reactions, and expressions are definitely influenced by my culture, my history, and my background. So I'm Hungarian. We are big, bold, life-loving people. And it doesn't take long for you to get to know me until you see that coming out in my personality and the way that I interact with people. I've also lived in multiple countries, and I'm comfortable with lots of different kinds of people. I've had work roles where I've done a lot of teaching and speaking, so I'm comfortable being upfront and talking to people. I don't get anxious or nervous. And finally, I've been married for 40 years, and I have a husband who loves to cook and to do laundry. And so I don't have strictly defined gender roles. And those all impact the way that I act, react, and express myself. And then finally, if someone is living with changing cognition, that doesn't negate their emotions, their instincts, their physical or their sensory experiences, their background and their history. But it does add another layer on top of the things that are going inside of a person. A person will have dementia symptoms, and those symptoms impact their ability to think clearly and to manage their emotions, but their emotions and their experiences are still valid. We have a 3-part series called our Dementia 101 series. Those recordings are available on our website. We do those webinars live as well. And so if you want to learn more about kind of the symptoms of dementia and how those impact people, I'd encourage you to check out those video recordings. So this is just kind of a high level of summary of the things that we're talking about, that all the things that are happening inside of a person. So you've got your emotions and instincts, and you can see some examples there. You've got physical and sensory experiences, and you can see some of those there. a person's history, their background, and then their changing abilities potentially because of their dementia type, the dementia stage, and their language abilities or cognitive abilities. Under the physical and sensory, I want to point out a couple of things because there are a number of things that actually impact us physically. Things like infection, dehydration, depression, being over medicated or under medicated, um, being hot or itchy, or when the humidity is too high. All of those things impact the way that we feel and can cause us to interact differently and to act and react differently with the world. And that's particularly true with people with dementia. And so as we're kind of getting on, we're going to talk about decoding and understanding. And so it's really critical to think through, might this person be dehydrated? If I'm seeing a certain kind of action or reaction, asking yourself the question, could they be in pain? Could they be hungry? Could they be thirsty? Could they be, could something that they're eating not be sitting well with their stomach? So number of things that can be going on inside a person that you don't necessarily know, or they may not be able to necessarily express. I have a bad hip. Sometimes it flares up. It makes me cranky. You wouldn't necessarily know that I had a bad hip or that I was having that pain. You would only be seeing how I was interacting with you. And so teasing out what's underneath can be helpful. So we've talked about what's going on inside people. Let's talk about what's going on outside of people that can influence their behaviors. We're going to break this into 3 categories. We're going to talk about 3 different things that influence us and our actions, reactions, and expressions that are happening outside. So first, there's what's the particular task or activity that we're engaging in? What's happening in the environment, that the person is in? What's going on around them? And then what's happening with the people that I'm interacting with, or that a person's interacting with, and what's their approach? What's the way that they're interacting with me, impacting me? So let's unpack the environment a little bit. If you're thinking about the environment for a person living with dementia or ourselves, what happens when you're in an unfamiliar place, or if there's lots of people around? That definitely impacts you. Is the room cluttered? Is the space that you're in cluttered? Is it overwhelming? Is it overstimulating? Is it understimulating? Is there glare? Is it inviting? Is it warm? Are there safe? Is it safe? Are there dangerous objects around? Is there mold? All of those things can impact us from the environment. Time is a part of the environment. What's happening? What's the season? What time of year is it? What time of day is it? Are we in the winter? Are the days shorter? Is it in the afternoon after a long day? This is particularly true if your brain is working overtime because of a dementia. Are there holidays? Is there a buzz because there are holidays around? Are these holidays that are hard for you because you're missing people? Those all have to do with the temporal environment, the time environment that we're in, the time context. What's happening with the task? Is the task that a person is engaged in, is it the right task for my abilities? Is it too complicated? Is it too easy? If someone's helping me, are they providing the right level of support? Are they over helping? Or are they under helping? All of those impact how we engage with a task. We want tasks. We thrive when a task or an activity provides just the right challenge for us. It's not too hard. It's not too easy. We've got the tools that we need. It's just enough stimulation. It's just challenging enough, or just is the right fit for us to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And then there's the social environment that we're all in. Who's around us and how does that influence us? Are their family and friends? Are there a lot of people making is that a helpful thing or is that an unhelpful thing? Is the television on? Are there multiple televisions on? Is the atmosphere like a sports bar? If a person is living with dementia and in more of the later stages, is the television confusing in the sense that it's crossing a time barrier or a space barrier? Is the newscaster talking to me? Is there negative news on the television? All of those are happening in the social environment. And then finally, we want to talk about the quality of the relationships to the people that are in our environment. When we talk about relationships, I want to ask the question, how do people who are outside of you make you feel inside? So that the way that we relate to people and the way that people relate to us produces feelings and emotions and even instincts within us. So Dr. Dan Siegel is a physician and a psychiatrist, and he's one of the world's most recognized leaders in understanding how our interpersonal relationships throughout life fundamentally shape our brains and our neural processes. The way that we relate human to human actually changes our brain physiology. We see this with children as they're growing up with parents and really across the lifespan. And so Dr. Siegel is one of the leaders in what's called attachment theory. And he's known for his work on understanding the key components that contribute to what's called a secure attachment. And particularly, again, between children and their caregivers. And these key components also apply to individuals who are living with cognitive impairments from Alzheimer's disease or other dementias, not because people with dementia are like children. They are not like children. But when you're talking about cognitive processes that are changing and are diminishing and declining, there's a cognitive immaturity or cognitive ability that can be influenced by relationships, either positively or negatively. So you may be asking, why on earth are we talking about relationship attachments here? And I'm hoping that as we go through this, and you'll see how this applies. So the four fundamental needs that influence a positive relational attachment are being safe, seen, soothed, and feeling secure. And first, let's talk about safety. Safety is it speaks to physical and emotional safety. It's about creating a safe environment where the person feels secure and protected in their relationships. Being seen means that a person's experiences, that their thoughts and emotions are acknowledged and are validated. It involves active listening, paying attention, and being present. When people feel seen, it enhances their sense of self-worth, their value, and their importance. Being soothed, comforted, reassured, and supported when a person is in distress, or when being soothed and comforted, reassured, and supported when I'm in distress or when you're distressed, helps me to regulate my emotions and to activate my coping mechanisms. And then finally, a sense of security is experienced when safety, being seen, and being soothed are all a possibility. So a sense of security is experienced when a person knows that their partner or their carer, whoever's caring for them, is predictable is trustworthy in the relationship. And that means being consistent, being reliable, being available. And for those of you who are on the call, who are in a role caring for someone with dementia, I just want to acknowledge that this is hard work. It's hard work. And so being consistent and reliable and available can feel overwhelming because caregiving can feel overwhelming. But it's more about an attitude of appreciation for the person and validation and providing that presence with the person to validate their experience that I'm talking about. So what can be done to decrease and potentially avoid distressing behaviors? And on the flip side, the opposite would be true. What can be done to increase and promote positive behaviors? This is a little bit of a busy slide, but hang in here with me. There's a group of people that, oh gosh, back in the 70s, so we're now talking 50 years ago, that formed an organization called the Eden Alternative. It was led by a doctor named Dr. Bill Thomas, who was the first person to really say, he was working in nursing homes, and he was the first one to really say that nursing homes should not feel like an institution, that where people live should feel like home. And so we need to change what nursing care, dementia care looks like. And there was a point when the Medicare and Medicaid services were really saying, we have to look at the quality of life that people are having in the nursing home environment. And the folks from the Eden Alternative said, you're absolutely right. And quality of life is critical. But the tools for measuring quality of life don't work for the tools that you're using to measure quality of life in the general population don't necessarily work in the population for people living with dementia. We have to look at quality of life differently. And so they came up with their recommendations for how do we support how do we promote quality of life, and what does that mean for someone who's living with dementia? And so they identified these 7 domains of well-being. And you can see on the bottom are kind of the groundwork is laid through concepts of identity and connectedness. And when people feel firmly rooted in their identity and they feel connected, then they have an experience of security and can be autonomous. And that lays the foundation for meaning, growth, and joy. And so hopefully you can see some themes and some similarities between Dan Siegel's work, the safe, secure, soothed, and seen work, and how that applies in this particular situation. So when we're thinking about supporting the well-being of a person living with dementia, which is the opposite of their distress, right? We're trying to decrease distress and increase well-being. This gives us some clues into how do we promote well-being, or when ill-being is happening and not well-being, what might be some of the contributing factors? So how do we promote positive well-being? How do we promote positive relational attachments? We establish routines, create a safe environment, encourage open communication about thoughts and emotions. That's how a person begins to feel safe. We practice active listening, giving a person our full attention, showing interest, reflecting back what we're seeing, what their emotions might be, validating their experiences, and engaging with them in enjoyed activities. That's how people feel seen. We respond sensitively to people. With comfort and reassurance, we validate, we stay calm, we mirror what calm looks like in the midst of distress. We model things like pacing, breathing, tone in our voice. Our brains have things called mirror neurons, which means like people begin to, their brains pick up what's going on with our brains, and those mirror neurons begin to mimic what they're seeing. And so by you staying calm, by you modeling and mirroring what calm looks like in a distressing situation, creates the opportunity for those mirror neurons to kick in for a person. And then again, engaging or being consistent, a consistent source of support, and then engaging in positive interactions, things like affection and play and enjoyment, creating consistent, predictable daily routines and minimizing disruptions and changes. Those all lead to an experience of ongoing security for people. So how do we respond in a distressing situation? We validate people's feelings, their emotions, their instincts. This reinforces those 4 S's. We know that ultimately we want to diffuse this situation, de-escalate the situation, but how do you do that? Diffusing is related to soothing. And we just talked about the mirror neurons and kind of creating that calm presence in the midst of a distressing storm. Looking to soothe someone and to connect with someone so that they can de-escalate and move through the experience is what we're looking to do. And then you can actually help to redirect a person away from whatever was causing them distress in the moment. I want to make um, a statement here about redirection, because you hear that word a lot. And I want to ask you, have you ever experienced you're frustrated in the moment and someone is basically not hearing you and they're trying to move you to the next thing, or they're basically saying, stop being upset about that and move on to the next thing. That feeling of being belittled or not understood or not heard, if you then try to redirect me, that just increases my frustration. And so redirection is, or not even redirection, just new direction might be a better way for us to phrase this, helping a person to head into a new direction when they're stuck in a distressing situation is what we're aiming towards. But we have to kind of go through, you can't just redirect someone without that validation and connection, or it could backfire. But let's explore some kind of strategies for how to actually do some of these things that we're talking about. So validating is a term that you may or may not be familiar with. The good news is it's something that you can learn. It's something that you can practice. I have to practice all the time. I'm not naturally a validator. I'm naturally a doer and a fixer. And so, but I've improved in my capacity to validate. And so it feels a little bit funny, but I would encourage you to kind of practice these things, in your car or in the bathroom when you're on alone. And how you validate is basically you want to identify what's the emotion, you think that you might be understanding emotion, and to confirm what that emotion is. You want to show the person that you're actually seeing them, that you're hearing their experience it. And so you could say things like, gee, it sounds to me like you're feeling frustrated. Is that right? Or something like, I can understand why you're feeling frustrated. It makes sense that you feel disempowered. It makes sense that you feel marginalized. It makes sense that you're angry that you can't do that anymore. It makes sense that you think whatever it is, or just acknowledging, gee, it seems like you're having a tough day. Not being able to do this must be difficult for you, or having a challenge, having something that's been so easy for you before now being so hard, that must that must be really hard. That must be really, I can't imagine what that feels like. You have every right to feel that way. Or things like, I'd feel that way too. Or even, it's completely normal for you to feel whatever. Because it is completely normal for people living with dementia to have their emotions, especially in the early stages. It's completely normal for you to feel loss, for you to be grieving, for you to feel like your world's turned upside down. And these things are true for you as well. And I mean, you as well. I'm talking to you who are in the Zoom room. If you're here because you're caring for someone, it's completely normal for you to feel frustrated, overwhelmed. This is difficult work. It's difficult for you to be in this situation. That's validating. Those are some examples. Validation is the recognition or the affirmation that a person or their feelings or their opinions are valid and worthwhile. Validation is being present, providing acceptance, respect. It's normalizing a person's experience. It's seeking to understand, and it's listening for that underlying need. What's that emotion that's underneath kind of what I'm seeing here? Validation is not trying to fix the problem or to solve the problem. It's not agreeing necessarily with the person's emotion. An emotion is an emotion. It's not a right or a wrong. It's just an emotion. Validation's not minimizing the person's experience. It's not guessing and then moving on. And it's not giving advice. So validation, hopefully you can see by validating someone's experience, it really gets to those experiences of safety, being seen, soothed, and secure. Let's go back to the emotions a little bit, especially when you think about the opposite core emotion. So often, as I was saying, negative emotions are often related to this experience of power or disempowerment. Think about the lack of control, being out of control. And here are some examples that you can say when a person might be experiencing kind of a power challenge. You want to take that power situation, that power out of the situation. And how do you do that? Take the blame. Take the blame for something, for whatever's going on. Take the blame for it and apologize. Apologize. Ask for forgiveness. Do not argue with someone who has a cognitive impairment. Agree with them. Tell them they're right. When this is particularly challenging for people who've been in relationship for a long time, because as grown adults, as we grow up as an adults and as we relate to each other as adults, we relate on this very heady cognitive space. We talk through things. We logically reason through things. And so our typical response to challenge is to talk it through or to reason it through. And when you're relating to someone who has changing cognitions, logic doesn't flow in the same way. And so the logic will break down in a person's head. So do not get into a logical argument. You will not win. It will not be helpful because the other person's brain is just going to continue to have misaligned logic. So what do? Don't argue. Sometimes you go with the flow. And if you haven't seen Frozen, I'd encourage you to do it, because the Let It Go song is a helpful one. As I said, we've got a few webinars that will be helpful for you that are recorded. The Understanding Emotional Connections, we have 3 on the Dementia 101s that actually go into this, but the Understanding Emotional Connection one, we do a deeper dive into the emotions that we've been talking about. So hopefully those will be helpful. So now that you have a better understanding of the internal things that can influence behavior, the things that are going outside of the person, let's look at a process that you can use to help you decode a particular situation. And by decoding, I mean you're going to do some detective work. So after you have a situation where a person is expressing themselves, or whether they're responding or reacting in a way that seems like an unusual way of behaving, you can use this process to kind of systematically work through why might that behavior be happening? Why is the person acting, reacting, and expressing themselves in this way that is not typical? So decoding is like detective work. You want to analyze the situation to try to determine why it happened. Then hopefully you can make changes and adjustments to keep a negative situation from happening again. And the converse, you can look at a really positive situation that happened. When did a person have a positive emotion, and what contributed to it? What were the circumstances that produced that positive experience? So you can use the same process to decode negative reactions and behaviors and positive reactions, behaviors. Okay. So you want to systematically work through this situation by asking things like, okay, what's happening? And sometimes you may need to ask, why is this a problem? Is this actually a problem? Who is this a problem for? If a person is just maybe doing something that's a little bit bizarre to us, but doesn't seem to be distressing to them, and they're not at risk for hurting themselves, maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe we need to let it go. But working through that, what's happening? Why is this a problem, and why could it be happening? Then you're going to ask yourself, what could possibly be going on inside a person? What could possibly be happening outside of the person? What could be happening with the task? What's going on with the task or the activity that the person was doing? What was happening with the people around? Were there things that were going on with the person's approach? Where was this happening? And then what might I be able to do or change in order to influence the situation? What might I be able to try to change that situation? And so good news is we've got a few tools for you to use to guide your thinking. This is a very busy slide, but I just wanted you to see that everything that we've talked about is on this sheet of paper. So you don't have to remember what are all the things that were going on inside the person? What are all the things that were going on outside the person? What's happening with the activity? This checklist, you can kind of work yourself through this checklist to tickle your thinking and to dive, what some potential factors might be. We've also got this wrapped up into a little worksheet that you can use. So again, it kind of walks you through, what is a person doing? What's the reaction of the behavior that I'm actually kind of isolating here? Let's describe it. What did we see? Because people are behaving in certain ways, but what are you seeing? How would you describe that? Not with the emotions, but How would you describe it in terms of like, what are they doing verbally? What's the person do? What's happening in their body? Are there any clues there? Are they sweating? Are they rocking? Are they tapping? Are they physically moving in a way that might give you a clue? Are they acting in an unusual way towards people? Are they pushing things away? Are they grabbing things? Are they throwing things? Are they misusing objects? Or, are they being too forceful with them? Or are they being super careful with them? All of those things can give you clues into what a person might be experiencing. And then again, we've got all of those ups here. All of those kind of checklists are also on this little worksheet. I think Pam can drop those in that chat for you as well. Oops, looks like she already did. They're already there for you. And so here's some other practical strategies that you could try. Let's wrap up with this, and then we'll have plenty of time for some questions. So as a general rule, when you're relating to a person who's living with a cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, there is a general rule you want to simplify your communication, because the brain has to take in all the information that you're providing. And so how do you simplify your communication? Give the person your full attention. Make sure you're making eye contact with them. Acknowledge what the person's saying. That's where the validation comes in. Go along with their beliefs. If it seems like their logic is off, go along with it. Make sure that you allow a sufficient time for a person to understand what you're saying and to respond to what you're saying. Processing speed goes way down. So it takes a longer time for a person to actually, the brain to process the information that's coming at them. So slow down. Use words of encouragement. Be prepared to, like, what are you going to help the person to move into? What you're moving them out of something? What are you going to move them into? What are the pleasurable experiences? What is a helpful thing that you can direct someone towards? Plan to provide simple directions, 1 step at a time, 2 steps at a time. No more giving 6 tasks in 1 sentence. Pay attention to your body language. How's your body communicating to the person? Be aware of your facial expressions. And then you may use different types of cues for the person. You may use visual cues or verbal cues. And remember that communication goes beyond words. It includes things like your body position. So you want to make sure that your eye level, that you're maintaining eye contact. Use touch, gentle touch to calm, to draw attention to you, to the situation, to provide grounding. Don't come in from the behind. People's sensory ability, their sensations may be reduced. And so you don't want to startle someone. Make sure that you're keeping your emotions in check, being calm, monitoring your own stress, using comforting tone. Watch your voice tone, not too loud, not too soft, not too pitchy. Pay attention to those things. Watch the pace of your language, not too fast, not too slow, smooth. I think of the ballast of a ship. If you think of a big ship that has ballast in the base, they have like concrete in the base to hold that ship steady when the wind is blowing and the waves are turbulent. Think of yourself as providing ballast in this situation. There are some wonderful guides that have been created for family caregivers and also for people living with dementia, that have been written by people with Alzheimer's and dementia and caregivers of people. These are called the By Us, For Us guides. And this is one that's on enhancing communication, that's written by people living with dementia. There are just some great quotes in here that I've pulled out, and I've got the link for you there, and it's also in the slides. These are free You can download them free, but really nice resource for you all. But just underscoring this concept of, speak directly to me. Do not talk to me as though you're speaking to a child. Ask me what I'm experiencing, how I'm feeling, validate what I'm saying. Treat me in the same way you would want to be treated in the same situation. We all want our feelings to be validated. We all want to feel seen. We all want to feel heard. And so how are we doing that? Making sure that we're doing that for one another. And I like this one. Acknowledge that you do not totally understand, but that you're trying. I think that's a big one. As far as the task or the activity goes, you want to make sure that you're trying to get that just right challenge. And so matching a person's abilities to the tasks, that's in the Dementia 101 talk on stages and ability. So for sure, take a deeper dive into that webinar if this is kind of where you're struggling. You want to pay attention to the environment. Might not need to have too many, some people just need to be set up and then left alone. Some people may need a little bit of assistance, but make sure that they're still contributing. Some people can get by with, checklists or post-it notes, and these things will change, as their symptoms change and progress, but kind of knowing the different ways that you can modify a task along the way is helpful. Some people do better with simple choices. Some people do better, labels may be appropriate. So here's kind of just some general ways of thinking about activities and tasks. You want to make sure that they're meaningful, that they're stimulating, that they're not too hard, that they're not too easy, that you're setting up the task for the stage that a person's in. You may want to set things out in advance. You might want to arrange them in the order that a person is going to use them, particularly like with things like dressing. You may want to simplify what's going on. Simplify things in the closet, simplify things in the drawer so that it's easier for the person to be successful in their activities. Making sure things are, there's good lighting, that it's warm. And again, establishing routines, repeat the same things, day. And, people talk about that being boring, but when a brain doesn't have the capacity to organize itself, having structure in daily living is really critical to fostering that sense of security. And I just want to highlight here, I want you to think about, if you can't do something, if I can't do a task, how might I feel? If I can't do something, especially if it's something that I used to be able to do, how does that make me feel? Makes me feel stupid or inferior or ashamed or maybe guilty. All of those are in that core emotion of sadness. I could be frustrated or irritated or critical or angry. I could feel out of control. Those are all related into that core emotion of mad, which is related to power. I could feel discouraged or inadequate, embarrassed, helpless, insecure, confused. Those are all related to that experience of scared. And so you can see when a person can't do a task, the feelings and emotions that those generate are the same feelings and emotion that go against our feeling safe, secure, seen, and go against our experiences of promoting well-being. So you might understand why I'm an occupational therapist now who works in this field, because the way that we interact with our daily activities and the things that we engage in with our time, the occupations that fill our time, are directly related to how we feel inside. And so engaging in meaningful occupation can either detract or make us feel better inside, or can produce negative emotions, which then cause negative reactions and actions and expressions. So we want to work for ways to promote joy and resilience. And the way that we do that is really helping people to find meaningful things to do. What brings you joy? What brings you meaning? And here's, some examples of that. And like I said earlier, when you see those glimmers of hope and joy and peace, what are the circumstances? What is producing that emotional response? Use your decoding strategies to identify what's producing that positive experience, and then recreate it and recreate it and recreate it. There was a wonderful study, and I'll wrap up here. There was a wonderful study that was done with people living with dementia a number of years ago, and I'm dating myself now. But if you ever saw the film Forrest Gump, there's a very sad scene in Forrest Gump where, spoiler alert, the woman of Forrest Gump's dreams dies. And it's just heart-wrenching. It's just terribly emotionally distressing. There's another movie at the same time. It was called When Harry Met Sally. And there's a certain scene in the diner where Sally is acting out a very positive emotional experience. And the study, there was a research study where they took a group of people living with dementia, and they showed them the Forrest Gump scene and the When Harry Met Sally scene. And the people who had the Forrest Gump scene were sad and had negative, sad emotions an hour after, 3 hours after, 7 hours after, 24 hours after watching that film with that deep emotional experience. The people who had the positive When Harry Met Sally movie, they were happy in the moment. They were happy an hour after the video was over, 3 hours, 7 hours, 24 hours after the video. Why do I show these examples? Because the good news is that we can produce positive emotional experiences for people that are lasting and that push a positive emotional feeling into the future. And so how do we want to promote well-being? We want to promote well-being for ourselves and for the people who we're caring for. We want to produce those positive emotional experiences and dose them out just like a person gets a medication. If you get your prescription of a positive experience throughout the day, that keeps you going. And there's lots of research now that's been done on happiness and where, why do we do positive things for ourselves? Because they boost our emotional state and keep our emotional states higher. So I put that out there because if we can help people to find joy and meaning because they can't find it for themselves anymore, that's a wonderful role that we can fill and will ultimately have a significant impact on reducing distress and what are termed behaviors. So Olivia Cohen, our Director of Early Stage and Engagement Services, did a wonderful webinar on creative connections. There's some resources there for you. Again, you're welcome to do that. And we have these recorded for you all, but we do them live again. And so I want to, again, put that out there. And finally, we've talked about a lot of information tonight. And this isn't a one and done. I want you to know, as Pam said at the beginning of the webinar, our services here at CaringKind are free of charge, and you are welcome to give us a call or to schedule a time to talk with one of our navigators about your particular situation, and especially if you're having challenges with distressing moments and distressing behaviors, we've got some tools to work through with you on those topics. And so you can make a phone call and schedule a time. You can put up that QR code will take you directly to a booking link. And so you can schedule a time to speak to one of our navigators if you haven't done that. And so I'd encourage you all to do that. And here's our contact information. And that's all I have for tonight. I'm going to leave this up, but I am happy to take any questions, or if anybody's got any questions or comments now, we're happy to take a few minutes and talk through them.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. We appreciate that. We've moved you out of focus mode, so if you'd like to turn on your camera, we do have a couple questions in the chat that we can start with. We have a question from Ellen. How do you follow along with their thinking when they are being aggressive, accusing people without cause?
You can't. So there's only, and I don't mean that in a trite way. I mean, when a person's brain has a disease, our brains don't like misinformation, or our brains don't like gaps in information. And so it will create connections between information. And so logic doesn't happen sequentially in a person, especially as their dementia is advancing. And so the logic, what's making sense to the person in their brain is not going to make sense to you necessarily. And so what are you doing? You're looking to validate an emotion, not the thinking. You're looking for what's the underlying emotion and validate the emotion. You're trying to get a connection and to help the person move through that thought and off that thought. One of the things that happens in dementia is the front part of the brain controls our ability to kind of move on and to move through. And when that part of the brain is broken, then a person does what we call perseveration, which means it's just ruminating in there. It's just going on and on and on. And you kind of have to like almost do like a jump start to, it's like the old-fashioned records. I mean, again, I'm dating myself here, but remember when we had records and the needle would get stuck and you'd have that skip, 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 because the needle couldn't move on because there was a scratch in the record. We're trying to get that needle to move on to the next thing. And so knowing who your person is and what's meaningful to them is what you're trying to get them to. So you're looking to connect and trying to find a door out to a positive experience and away from that negative experience. And again, we can, oftentimes you hear about, people are, they're missing their wallet, or they're, somebody's stealing money from them. And it's because they're not keeping track in the same way. And so I put my purse down the same place where I've always put it down. If my purse isn't there, it's not because I wasn't paying attention. I put my purse down somewhere else. It's because somebody had to have stolen it, because I know in my head, for 30 years, I've been hanging my purse on the same hook. And so if it's not there, broken brain says someone must have stolen it, because I couldn't have not put it where it belonged. Hopefully that is a little bit of helpful. What are other questions?
Stephanie, we have another one on a similar theme. How can you follow a loop of reasoning that has been going on, let's say all morning or for several days, once you have acknowledged their feeling, fear, concern, listened, redirected in a loving and patient ways, but the loop just continues. You can't break it.
And this is where kind of teasing out, it's like, okay, when, what happens? When does it start? How do I get ahead of it? You're really trying to figure out, how do I avoid it altogether in the first place? What can I do in order to, like, and this is where you kind of like want to change the routine, right? If you could figure out what's the routine that's producing this, let's infuse something positive before that routine even starts. And so trying to break it in that way, is a strategy. And you may have to try multiple different things so that you're infusing something new, and then you're really kind of stepping the person through, like we're going step by step down this other path. Having said that, a person, if a person is, it's that same loop, there's something in that loop that's rooted in a core emotion. Is it that they're scared of something, or that an instinct is kicking in, that they're trying to be protective of something, or that they're avoiding something? And so again, those clues, they may give you some clue as to what's going on. But what I wanted to say was that what's hard for us with people with dementia, if you see somebody who's had a spinal cord injury, or or a stroke, those are visible, right? We see people who are in wheelchairs, we see people who use walkers, we see people who have physical disabilities, we see the disability, and we're reminded of what's going on with them, and so our expectation is different. When someone has a brain disease, we're not seeing that the the house, the place in the brain that houses short-term memory, is that house is no longer there. And so we don't see that gap, in the person's brain, that reminds us that they have no recollection that they've asked the same question, 2 minutes ago. It's the first time they're asking it from their perspective. It's the first time that they're doing the loop, which that doesn't make it easier, to live with it every day. But I think it makes it a little more understandable as to why it's happening, and that it's not intentional. But I'd encourage you all to try to figure out, you've got to know your own limits as well, too. And, that just like we're trying to take care of, of, the people that we're caring for, we're being considerate of their emotional needs, their need to be soothed, and their need to feel secure, and their need to feel seen. You have those needs too. And so you've got to figure out how you're going to get those needs met from somebody else now, or from your, who's your system of support, because you may not be able to get them, back the same way from the person that you're caring for.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And while we look to see if there are any additional questions, that was a beautiful setup to some of our programs that we have here. I'm thinking specifically of some of our Partnering Together group, which was one of our support programs for care partners that includes a little bit of education and a lot of support in a group setting, where people really get to ask these kinds of questions, talk through different situations that happen, get that empathy, and know that they're not alone. And so we also have one-to-one support through our navigators, which you have in the chat. There's a number and the link to our bookings, so you can schedule something right now if you like. And these are great ways to get some of that support. Let's see if there's, as we have just 1 or 2 more minutes, any last questions? We have some thank yous. Thank you for being here. We're so glad that you're a part of our community. And we hope you continue to come back. The recordings will be added to our education hub on our website. I can put the link into our education calendar and education hub. They may take a few weeks to a month to be loaded, but that's where they will be.
I'd encourage you all, thank you all for being here. The fact that you came to this webinar tonight with the title, tells us that you may be having some experiences with people that you care for that are experiencing distress or who are behaving differently. And I want to acknowledge again, this is hard work. It's hard work. It's not work that it's caregiving is a job. It's not a relationship. And it's a job that you haven't necessarily been trained for. And so we can help you do that. And, figuring out how to continue to be in a relationship with a person that's changing takes a lot. And so we want to be here to support you and to acknowledge the challenges that you have, and that just to say that we're here for you, and we'll help
Yes.
in whatever ways that we can. But thank you for being here.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. And Francis, we see what you wrote in the chat. It is hard when they're removed from the home environment, the sundowning, wanting to go home. That does make it more difficult and can be just heart-wrenching for the care partners to hear that that's happening. And so we encourage you to again take care of yourself in those moments too. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, for your expertise, for your compassion, and really providing these practical tools to start to understand what's happening and how to create those positive experiences and those positive moments of joy for folks.
Absolutely. The slides are in the chat. If you want them now, you can download them right away from the chat that's here, and we'll get those. The slides we can get up to the website sooner than we can get the video up there. But stay tuned, and thank you all for being here. It's my pleasure to be with you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.